there, welcome to AMC Rewind. We got some cool new theme music. I like it. Rewind. They didn't take our suggestions or sound effects, unfortunately. Right. I'm Alicia Malone. This is the show where we celebrate older films, films you've forgotten about, and give you some recommendations for your weekend watching. I'm joined, as always, by my Rewind co-host, Mr. Jon Schnepp.
What's up, everybody? Get ready to rewind.
We do this all the time. This is Germain Lussier from Slash Film. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be fun.
Now, I love all the comments that people leave on our videos, and I have been reading them, and a lot of people are saying, can you do something a bit lighter? Because a lot of the topics we've done, the movies we've done, have been a bit dark, which is fine.
What, do you don't like dark revenge westerns?
Why
David Cronenberg?
No, people loving it, but they want some comedies as well. So this week we're doing 90s comedies. Now, Schnepp, I don't know if it's just me, but I have such an affection for comedies in the 90s. Do you think this was a good time for comedy, or is it just because I was growing up at that time?
No, it was a great time for comedy. Like, what were you, like 11 or 7? So a wee lass in Australia, you know, with her little bugaboo, like woo, like hanging out and
my boomerang.
Yeah, you know all the stuff that we know, shrimp on the barbie, you know, all the things.
Dundee, just watching it on repeat.
Yeah, here's my Australian accent. Ready, guys? Oh, you guys are going somewhere for a burger. It's all right.
It's terrible.
I know.
I didn't know what that was.
Horrible. So yeah, you know what? The 90s were a great time for comedy. I mean, I think of Austin Powers when I think of the 90s, and we've got a lot of other shows, but that one came to mind right off the top.
It seemed to be a time when lots of those SNL stars made the transition to movies. Jermaine, we're going to get into a couple that you really love, but what do you think about 90s comedies, or what are your favorites?
Well, we'll talk about my favorites. I don't want to spoil it just yet, even though I'm sure they see the headline.
Other favorites.
It's on the headline. Yeah, other favorites. Dazed Confused, Groundhog Day, PCU.
Yes.
You mentioned a lot of SNL stuff. That's true. I also think like Disney had some stuff like Cool Runnings, Bad Boys, the first one, which is funny, as opposed to the second one, which is action.
Showgirls, which was unintentionally
funny. And it was just, and it was a time when the movies could really push the envelope. Some of the movies we're going to talk about really do that, which you can't really do anymore. And I really like that about it.
Let me mention one in particular that pushed the envelope, Army of Darkness. It started as a horror series, then went to Evil Dead 2, which was kind of comedy horror, and then Army of Darkness, which was straight up comedy horror, but like emphasis on the comedy. And what a fun movie if you've never seen it.
And it seems like these kind of movies might not be made today.
No.
Or if they were, they'd be very different.
Yeah, like just another one of my favorites is called Half Baked, and it came out a little later in the 90s, but you don't really get many like pot comedies anymore or stuff like that. I mean, that was more of a 70s thing that the 90s are reacting to. And same thing with, you know, we're going to talk about some of the screwball, like over the top spoofs. That was like a 70s thing that got the 90s redid, and we're in a era now where they're going to come back in another 10 years or something like that.
Yeah, I hope so.
But yeah, the 90s is just it's just so crazy over the wall with comedy, and they're so rewatchable. Like.
Yeah, definitely. Let's get into two that Rewind definitely recommends. I'm sure you guys have seen them, but this could be worth a rewatch. First up, Wayne's World.
Wayne's World.
Yeah. Party on. Excellent. It was released in 1992, starring Mike Myers and Dana Carvey as rock and roll lovers and hosts of a public access TV show. These days it would be on YouTube. Yes. Directed by Penelope Spheeris. The budget was $14 million, made $122 million at the box office, which means it's the highest grossing film based on a sketch from Saturday Night Live, but actually Mike Myers originated the idea for Wayne when he was a teenager on Canadian TV. Now, the tricky thing about these sketches turned movies, Jermaine, is that what might be funny on TV for 3 minutes may not be funny for 90 minutes on the big screen. But why do you think Wayne's World works?
I think it's because it really just, it's different. Like Wayne addresses the camera. It tries different things. It tells like a decent story from beginning to end, but it really takes chances. What other movie had like a 60-second headbanging scene with Queen?
Yes.
Right.
Like that's not something you'd see in a movie. And like it was just the 3 endings and these things like that. Like I think that's what it was. It was really different and it was really funny and it was just great cameos. And actually, the Queen thing, that was my first. I was 12 when this movie came out, and saw it in the theater, and like that was my introduction to Queen. I was like, oh my god, Bohemian Rhapsody, this is awesome. So and there's another thing is that it has all these different sort of aspects coming in. So I think that's why it did so well. Plus, it also helped that. It was that SNL at that time was sort of hitting a renaissance almost. So I started watching SNL right before this movie came out. Then the movie came out. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the guys I can watch on TV every week. So like, then you'd watch SNL every week for a new Wayne's World sketch. And so it was it blended media in a way that, was pretty unique at the time.
I loved how pop culture heavy it was. It actually taught me a lot of things about America, like that little yellow different, like Lance brand.
That's another
from
scene that's
watching
different.
it.
Yeah, they had those extended commercial,
Product
brought to
placement.
you by this, and and also they, bringing in lines like "swing" and like,
A lot of catchphrases,
catchphrases
Not.
really early, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a kind of a resurgence for Rob Lowe as well, because just a few years before this movie he had his big scandal, and it was really interesting to see him come back and play a character that's against type and something really funny, and then it showed that Mike Myers could be a bankable star as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And I love these characters because they are really relatable, aren't they? And they're guys that you like them and you want to root for them.
Yeah, most of your friends are either a Wayne or a Garth, kind of. You're either an ass who's like really out there and crazy, or maybe meek, or maybe in the middle. But maybe you're half and half. But they're everymen, pretty much. And you love to see them with their friends, like hanging out. There's a lot of scenes in the movie that don't really advance the story too much.
Right.
They go to the donuts place, and Ed O'Neill goes off on his tangent about the heat of passion. It's called murder, and you're like, what is going on? This is so crazy. But again, that adds to it. That was quotable. That's something I would say to my friends back. We'd just stare at each other and do that stupid line or something like that. And it's just so much fun.
Yeah, it took 34 days to make. Apparently, it wasn't the best time on the set. That you can't tell at all, though,
Right.
because the chemistry between these characters are the best.
Yeah, and it's still there. Like they did the 40th anniversary of Saturday Night Live, and they brought back
That's
Wayne's
right.
World, and it was so much fun. It made me really think man, Mike Myers and Dana Carvey, why don't you do another Wayne's World 3? Because it's about time. It's only 20 years later.
It would be a great way to bring it back. I've thought about that a lot. I think they probably thought about it.
Yeah.
Because Wayne's World 2 came out the year later, and it's not very good. It's not terrible.
No.
Yeah.
But it's not anywhere near as good as the original. And I feel like now, like when you saw them on SNL, they closed that show. And it was just such a great resurgence. It probably is never going to happen because, Mike and Dana, you heard, they've moved on. But it would be really, really great to see that. I mean,
It would be, and that's where you could bring in a YouTube thing. Because what I like about it, watching it now, is I remember when I grew up watching this film, I thought, wouldn't that be a cool job to have a show where you talk about something you love in the basement? Now I feel like this is what
now
we
you do it. That's sort of true. I never thought about that. It is sort of, It's
Alicia, party on!
Yeah.
Party on!
Party on.
Rewind!
That's the theme song next week.
Yeah, next week.
Yeah.
We're doing our Wayne's World.
It also taught me how to correctly count down for camera, where you stop.
yeah.
Like,
Noah's Arcade is a great bit there, and oh man, I could go on and on just thinking about funny things in Wayne's World.
it's so quotable, so rewatchable. I watched it recently over the weekend, and then before that a few months before, and I still find it funny and still great. And every time I hear Queen on the radio, can't help it.
It's one of those movies I think that if it comes on Comedy Central or something like that pretty often, and if it's on, it's staying on.
Yes.
No matter where it is in the movie, you're going to watch it, you're going to enjoy it, you're going to laugh, you're going to get excited for Ballroom Blitz at the end by Crucial Taunt.
Well, what's weird is probably a lot of people watching this think that those three girls in the car are the first people to do that Queen song. Check out Wayne's World and you'll see where they got it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
That's where it started. All right, well, another great 90s comedy that is worth a revisit. Rewind recommends Mallrats. It's been 20 years since this film came out in 1995, written and directed by Kevin Smith. This was the second film in his View Askew universe. It was a year after 1994's Clerks, starring Jeremy London, Jason Lee, two best friends who get dumped by their girlfriends and spend the day at the local mall plotting to get them back with revenge and chocolate-covered pretzels. It also stars Claire Follini, Shannon Doherty, Ben Affleck, Jason Mewes, and Kevin Smith.
Don't
Smoochie
forget
Moochie
Rooker. Don't
and
forget Rooker.
Michael Rooker,
Michael
yeah.
Rooker. Now, recently, Schnepp, they announced that they're going to be making a Mallrats 2.
Yep.
Everyone's still excited.
Yeah.
People love this movie.
I'm very excited that, like, remember Kevin a couple of years back was like, I'm done, and the View Askew universe is done, and I'm not doing any more. Jay and Silent Bob are retired, and then now we got Clerks 3, we got Mallrats 2. He's doing these crazy, really fun horror films, which I'm super excited about. Like, I loved Tusk. I can't wait for Yoga Hosers and this weird moose straw. He's gonna make this trilogy of freaky, strange horror films, and I'm really excited about it. It's like his resurgence. He's re-embracing the fun part about being an independent filmmaker is you get to make whatever you want. And he's just following his bliss. He's like, I want to make this. He calls it his whimsy. It's like, I think it's great. And he's not afraid to, like, hey, look, I still got a Mallrats story to tell. Let's just do it. Everyone's down with it. Everyone wants to see it. I can't wait to see it. He's got to figure out some new weird question for Jason Lee to ask Stan Lee about sex organs. This is a thing. He's going to have to come up with a couple of new ones. We know. So.
I love a lot of things about Mallrats, but for me, what's interesting is that Clerks came out and it was a big hit independently. And it gave Smith this option. He could do whatever. So he does this studio movie called Mallrats that bombed when it came out. Like, nobody saw it. He tells a lot of great stories on his old DVDs about how, like, Friday morning he got the phone call and they're like, it's over. They're like, he's like, but maybe tonight? He's like, no, it's over. They're like, this is the end of the movie is done. And then I remember I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it on home video, and and I think that was part of it. It is like a home video movie. It's about a time and a place when you would go to the mall to hang out. You weren't online. You didn't have the internet to hang out with people. You went to the mall. You saw a movie. You'd get something to eat. You just walk around and kill time. You went to your friend's house. You don't go to your friend's house anymore at the beginning of this movie.
Just tweet them.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a perfect time and place of the mid-90s movie. And also, like, again, I was 15 when the movie came out. I probably saw it when I was like 16. And it's one of those early movies where I had finally seen enough movies and ingested enough pop culture that I got all the references. You're like, oh man, that's the Star Trek, that's Superman, that's Star Wars, And so that's one of those things where it sort of helped develop what I like in a movie. Like, I love that. I love being in the know. And it's Kevin Smith, and it's definitely super crass. And the writing is much better than the acting. I rewatched it again. But I also think Jason Lee's, it's one of the great breakout first roles of ever. He's so incredible as Brody, and I wish he would do more stuff, at this time. He had his little time, but yeah, it's not considered a great movie, I think, by history, but I think by the people who saw it when it came out, it's just great.
Yeah. I think it means a lot to a lot of people, and rewatching it now, it's interesting seeing the character of Brody, because he's a guy that's very familiar to us, particularly in this world where everybody loves comic books and loves video games and talks about it like that with their friends. But I feel like at that time, this was a different character. Totally. Broke the stereotype of who that type of person was.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that a guy like that could get the pretty girl.
Yeah.
But it was, it was sort of an 80s John Hughes thing, maybe a little bit too. But yeah, very much, very, very, very true. Like, yeah, the comic book thing now is so mainstream, where the movies are making billions of dollars. Back then, you had Superman and they had, like, the Batman series, and that's it. We're still 5 years from the first X-Men when this movie came out, So Brody right now, if he was still around, which is going to be interesting for Mallrats too. Now we're in a world where Brody is the cool guy.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the king of all the comic book nerds.
He is.
Yeah.
And like when you watch Mallrats nowadays, I mean, I remember seeing it when it came out, and I really liked it when it came out. It has these little, like, scenes in it that no one else. It's a Kevin Smith type of humor, like the one guy Dupleix just staring at the I can't see the boat, and then somebody's like, yeah, it's a boat. Whoa, just like these repetitive things, and then also just the return of someone like Brody. I can't wait to see how he's doing now, like 20 years later. So that's the exciting thing. You get to revisit, just like he's doing Clerks 3. You get to revisit all these characters that only got a one shot. Like a lot of these characters that you see get movies and television shows. These are people who are just trapped in a 90-minute thing that you have to watch again and again if you enjoy it.
Which is one of the reasons why I like Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. It's a little newer than that, but it's because you got Brody that came back, and all those people came back, and and the View Askew universe was something growing up that I really, really loved. I mean, and because again, you think about like the Avengers, and all these like weird movies crossing over. Kevin Smith did that in the 90s with the View Askew universe, Chasing Amy and Dogma, that all link together. So Yeah, Mallrats is probably the most appreciated of those because it's the weirdest and sort of, I don't know, but I love it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching it again because it'd been a long time since I'd seen it, but I'm glad that I got to rewatch it, particularly with all this talk of the sequel. I think Brody these days would be on AMC Movie Talk and he'd be killing it.
Yep.
Or Hero.
I think he would be owning the
He'd
AMC
be
Movie Talk,
owning,
so Campy better watch out.
Guys, I gotta admit, I'm Brody.
You are Brody.
So.
That's what happened with Brody.
And I think Kevin Smith has like everybody coming back except for that we know so far is Claire Forlani and Ben Affleck. Which Ben Affleck's got to do a cameo.
He has
gotta.
to.
He's gonna be in it.
I know.
We don't even need to have him be announced. We know they're bros. That he's gonna do it.
Can he just turn up somehow in a Batman shirt or talk about
maybe.
Batman?
They're all gonna be in it. I'm just,
Yeah,
they're
he's
not
just
gonna
stretching
not
it
be
out.
in
Kevin Smith
Yeah.
is using social media to its fullest extent.
He knows how to work it. He posted a photo of Stan Lee and Michael Rooker and them all back together going, number two's coming. That would be cool to see all those characters together. Even though that chocolate covered pretzel bit is really gross. Even rewatching it now, it's like,
hate watching Rooker eat that.
The
so
close-up,
delicious.
the
You're like,
close-ups of the finger.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, the game show scene, it's so over the top and crazy, and you're like, it's just like, the Gil Hicks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, did you know what? You're just like, oh my God. And you know what I love about this too, is when you bought the soundtrack, it had the clips of the dialogue on the soundtrack. And that was something that was an early thing for me. So you'd listen and like that would go right into a song. And I love that kind of stuff.
I like when they did that.
Yeah.
Like Pulp Fiction.
Yeah,
They
Pulp
used
Fiction
to
did
do
it too.
that.
That's right, yeah.
So there you go. Mallrats is definitely worth a rewatch, a revisit if you haven't seen it. Or if you haven't seen it at all, watch it from the very beginning. It's really fun.
Absolutely.
Okay, now we'll go to our segment which celebrates the anniversaries of films. Rewind remembers that 20 years ago, Kiss of Death came out.
Love that movie.
Nicolas Cage.
So good.
Helen Hunt, Samuel L. Jackson, Stanley Tucci, and David Caruso. It's about an ex-con who takes a deal to go undercover and try to catch a crime lord, loosely based on a 1947 film noir classic. Also, The Basketball Diaries, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Wahlberg, about a talented teenage basketball player who becomes addicted to heroin. This, for Leo, came after this boy's life and What's
Gilbert
Eating
Grape, yeah.
Gilbert Grape and Quick and the Dead.
Right before Titanic, too.
Right before Leo Mania took
Yeah.
off. And I remember seeing him in this film and thinking, oh, who's that stud? What are your memories about watching these movies?
It's funny. I worked at a video store, of course, in the
Yeah,
90s.
me
and
too.
I don't remember a lot about either of them, but I remember like Kiss of Death rented very well because they had such a good cast. And it's one of those movies that people didn't really hear of in the theater. And then to be like, oh, let's do this, and then they'd rent it, and I guess they liked it. I don't remember. And then Basketball Diaries was like it was the teen movie where kids would come in, like 3 girls or a couple dudes or whatever, and they'd be like, there's kids doing drugs or something. It's like a new thing. And I think Mark Wahlberg is in it, right? Early Mark Wahlberg stuff. So yeah, I mean, they're interesting, but it makes me feel really old.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
Kiss of Death is fantastic. If you've never seen it, you should check it out. Cage does a great job as like an aggro, crazy drug peddling dude who's like in charge of the Caruso's trying to get in there and break up this gang. It's a really fun film. I remember seeing it I think I saw it again 3 years ago, and it stands up. It's just a really good fun thriller. Like it's a crime thriller.
It's the age of David Caruso.
Caruso
Yeah.
less for me, but he's okay. But he's actually not annoying in this film. Like he's in what is it? King of New York. He has a great role in King of New York, and he has a great role in this. He's kind of the lead in this film, but he does great. So if you're not a Caruso fan, don't worry about it. You should see Kiss of Death regardless. It's fantastic.
I've actually never seen it.
Yeah, you
so
should. You would
upon
like
your
it.
recommendation, I'm going to watch it. Well, can you believe that 30 years ago, these movies came out? Well, both of them I haven't really heard of, but anyway. Moving Violations. This is a comedy which follows a group of different people who've lost their licenses, have to attend a driving course. Stars Jennifer Tilly, Fred Willard, James Keach, who's the brother of Stacey Keach Jr., and John Murray, who's the brother of Bill Murray. And it was also the film debut for a young Don Cheadle. And then Company of Wolves, which is a British Gothic fantasy werewolf story. Lots of similarities to Red Riding Hood, starring Angela Lansbury.
Right.
Haven't seen either of those.
I loved Company of Wolves when it came out because I was a big special effects nerd. And I loved The American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
And this movie also was like bragging about its special effects, but most of the special effects happened in dream sequences, which is where that cover is coming from.
Freaky.
There were these like really weird sequences where, basically when you turned into a werewolf, it broke out of you. So that's what you're seeing is it would just rip your skin apart and it was a full wolf underneath. And this is, I believe, Neil Jordan's very first movie. He directed it, and it's a really fun, atmospheric, strange, creepy, freaky film. I highly suggest it if you want to see something weird. Check out The Company of Wolves. Moving Violations, I have no idea what that is.
I guess it's a Roger Corman movie. It's funny, when it comes to these older movies, I always put it through my, teenage video store thing, like the last two. And these, I don't remember even having. I don't think they were on the shelves at all, even in the old section. But I mean, Moving Violations sounds like something I would like, where it's just like a goofy sort of. It sounds like Summer School or something like that from the 80s, like of just sort of your R-rated stupid comedy, which is sort of the theme of this anyway.
And I like that it stars the brothers of famous people.
Well,
I don't know what John Murray did after this.
I also want to mention The Company of Wolves has a lot of sex scenes.
Oh.
So it's like what really was
Werewolf
great about
sex scenes?
Werewolf sex scenes and weird, strange stuff. It's like that's what was great about these kind of R-rated, like late 80s, early 90s films. There was always like strange, freaky sex mixed with like bizarre creature makeup. Perfect movie.
I am in. As soon as you said werewolf sex, I'll be watching Company of Wolves this weekend. All right, back to our 90s comedies for our hidden gem. Rewind reveals Don't Be a Menace to South Central while drinking your juice in the hood. Took me ages to get that. It's released in 1996, written by Wayans brothers Sean and Marlon, who also star. It's a spoof film making fun of all the hood movies released in the late 80s, early 90s. To name just a few, South Central, Juice, Menace to Society, of course, Boys in the Hood. Similar to the 70s film I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker. So I'd never seen this film until a few days ago. I remember a lot of people talking about it when I was growing up, but I just never got around to seeing it.
Right.
Jermaine, you were saying you watch this all the time.
I watched it probably like once every 2 weeks when it came out. I watched it so much, and I hadn't seen it in a while, and I rewatched it before this, and it still made me laugh. But I couldn't believe that this movie even existed. It starts off with a joke about school shootings. No, I mean movie theater shootings, not school shootings. I'm sorry, because that happened in the premiere of Boys in the Hood, and like nobody cared, But it's a spoof of the horror of the Hood movies, but it just goes to so far the extreme. Like the main guy's character, his name's Ashtray. His dad is younger than him because of like that's the way it is, I guess, in this weird world. And people are robbing ice cream trucks and like when they have sex, they turn into monsters. And you're just like the movie, like if it goes through a lull for like 2 seconds, something really crazy is about to happen. And sometimes it misses, but when it lands big. I again, we were talking about quoting Wayne's World and Mallrats. I mean, to this day, I'm like 40s and 9s. It's my favorite stow. It's just, I love it. And it's sort of a precursor to, they a couple years later did Scary Movie, which was a big hit in the same vein where they were making fun of the horror films of the late 90s. And this was making fun of the Hood movies, but it didn't land as much, maybe because it was so politically incorrect and grossly offensive in the greatest way. But it's a really underappreciated movie. Only 23% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. So that's not a ringing endorsement, but I would give it my ringing endorsement.
I remember I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker way more than I remember this. And you're right, the Scary Movie films, or that franchise, specifically Scary Movie 2, are the ones that I ended up seeing like 3 or 4 times because it was always on cable. Like you'd be like 2 a.m, like, I wonder what's on. Click, 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 click. Oh, Scary Movie 2. I'll watch that again. It's like whenever that time period was where like things would just endlessly repeat before you had the freedom of streaming. And now it's like, oh, we've unplugged everything. Watch whatever I want when I want. It was before
on
that.
Demand.
So, on demand. My demand. So this was before your demands were met. It was unreasonable demand. So. Right. Yeah, this movie, I just remember seeing it once, and nothing sticks. I was trying to think through it. I can't. Yeah, I
mean, like there's jokes in here where the young father who's younger than him tells him that drunk driving is fun. He tells him not to wear condoms because they kick away all the feeling. Like it's just like why is this? It's like I can't believe this is happening. But
I have to see this movie.
It is
again.
crazy, and like. I mean, it's just, and it's very colorful, and it really actually, the filmmaking, watching it again, having seen, all those movies, in the Hood movies, they do a pretty good job of like, ripping off some of the shots in it. Really like, doing very, very specific versions of the characters. Omar Epps is actually cameos in it, and he's in a couple of those movies. There's a white guy named The Man who goes and kills like black guys in this just because like that's what they do. Yeah. It's like, geez, man, this is crazy. This movie would never ever get made now.
Yeah, I don't think it would because it is so politically incorrect. And watching it for the first time over the weekend, it was hit and miss for me. But there was some jokes that was really funny. Like there's a joke about having a message in the movie, and I thought that was great. And then there's the stupid jokes and the crude jokes, and not just making fun of the Hood movies, but then there are moments like there's a 9.5 weeks type scene, which is similar to what Hot Shots did. And then there was a Stand By Me moment as well. So it's really funny look at the movies of that time.
Yeah. I mean, if nothing else, like I said, the fact that the Wayans did this movie, sort of got this weird stuff out of their system, and then made Scary Movie, which became a huge, huge franchise for them. It is sort of, it's almost a prequel to that. And so that historically gives us some context. But yeah, I mean, one of the first moments of this movie, the guy decks his grandma, just knocks her out. Like you're like, what?
You're like, what am I in for?
What is this gonna be?
And as you said, it got really bad reviews, but it did make $20 million in its domestic theatrical run, and it had a budget of 3.8. So it was really
gave
successful.
them the chance to make Scary Movie.
Yeah, and again, I didn't see it in the theater, but caught it on VHS when I was working at the thing, which was a lot of these movies. I think I know there were also the big hits, Wayne's World being one, but the VHS then that was the way you'd watch movies. Now we have so many that like you almost forget about a lot of this.
Yeah, stuff. And that's a sad thing is because we have the access to so many movies. If you went into one of these mom and pop VHS stores, not even Blockbuster, but just a mom and pop store, they would always have even weirder films. Yeah. I remember like I liked going to the non-Blockbusters because it'd be like, oh, they have the Charles Band, like even strange. It's a film called Society. Blockbuster won't carry Brian Yuzna's Society, but Vlimpies will. Those had weird names like Vlimpies Video Store.
Yeah, I worked at Video Easy, and that was EZY.
Oh, mine. Yeah, I was 3C Video with the number 3 and then the letter C.
And
my pal worked at Video Schmidio in Chicago.
Video Schmidio.
And he would always bring home all kinds of movies. So.
Yeah, I loved it doing my recommendations of what people should watch, which I guess I'm still doing, sort of. And it's funny.
Yeah, but on the web.
But on the web. And it's funny because that's the good thing about AMC Rewind is that we're reminding people to watch these films, which are available on all these Netflix, iTunes, Amazon, all these different platforms now.
Yeah, if I had to like go out and find this, it would have been pretty hard. But it was like, Vudu for like $3.
Yeah, it's like, boop, I'll just watch it.
Yeah. Yep. I was like, you can go buy it. You can probably find it in the used DVD bin somewhere.
Yeah.
Or I can just order it right now in high definition immediately. It's just nuts.
Crazy world of the future. That's what we live in now.
It is. But we like to remind you about the past here at AMC Rewind. So if you want to watch some 90s comedies this weekend, check out Wayne's World, check out Mallrats, and check out Don't Be a Menace to South Central while drinking your juice in the hood.
Got it.
And make sure you let us know which 90s movies you love to rewatch and visit over and over again in the comments below. We always forget to mention a bunch, so I like reading your suggestions. And Schnepp, where can people find you online to tell you what they watched?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, just at Jon Schnepp and at TDOSLWH. I've got a documentary about a 90s movie that never got made.
Yes.
It's called The Death of Superman Lives What Happened. I'm premiering it at the Egyptian Theater April 30th. That's Thursday. And then May 1st and 2nd. You can get your tickets at fandango.com. Check it out and come and meet us. So a whole bunch of us from AMC will be there on Thursday night. So come on down.
And you spoke to Kevin Smith.
Yeah, and Kevin Smith is actually in the film. Had a great time talking with him. He's one of the funniest guys you could ever talk to. Had a lot of extra anecdotes that aren't part of his Kevin Smith, tour that he did. And it was a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun making this film. A lot of hard work too.
Yeah, lots of hard work. You've done so well with it. And Germain Lussier, thanks for joining us. Where can people find your work?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Germain Lussier, and then I'm working and writing movie news every day on /film.com.
Yay, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for watching. You can find me at Alicia Malone on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And make sure you share this show with your friends because we want to get it out there a little bit more. Until next week,